All right, so we are gathered here today to talk about Orchard Commerce, which is a project that I started, I don't know, 2-3 years ago. And the idea was that, well, I thought that any CMS should have a commerce offering. And I had built a commerce platform before that I built for my own business. That was called Nwazet Commerce, that I'm trying to get here. Is it? Well, I'm not even sure if it's here. But it was based on the first version of Orchard. And as you can see, I cannot type and speak at the same time. There it is. All right. So yeah, so this was based on the first version of Orchard. It was working pretty well, but when Orchard Core started, it seemed like a good idea to kind of rewrite that, because trying to adapt this code to the new platform would probably carry too much baggage. And yeah, so I started working on the new Core Commerce, which is on the Orchard org. So Orchard CMS, and then that guy, oops. And there it is. Okay, so I've been working pretty hard on starting the project, but here's the issue for me and the reason why we're having this meeting today. The first version, Nwazet Commerce, was really built because I needed it. I had a business that I was running on the platform, so I was maintaining it regularly, and it was a very decent commerce platform for Orchard. With Core Commerce, it's a little different because I don't have that business anymore, and I don't really have the motivation to push the project where it should be. So I contacted the good folks at Lombic, who were very receptive to the idea of taking over the project and maintaining it going forward. Is that a fair way to represent it?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So today I want to go over the current state of the project and do some kind of visit through the code base so that you can get an idea of what's available, what's not available, what still needs to be done to get a minimal viable product. And by the way, talking about minimum viable product, one of the first things we did on this project was to create a number of feature issues, for lack of a better name, where the intended design is captured, and we can, follow the progress. So there is one that is called minimum viable product that is kind of a parent work item that points to all the other ones. So this is the list of features that we determined was kind of the bare minimum that a commerce platform should have. So we've talked in the past about how there is no such thing as simple commerce, and that's something that I want to emphasize. That's it's kind of the base spirit of the project, which is that there is no such thing as simple commerce. There is such a thing as a simple commerce site, but they're all different. So if you're building a platform to build commerce applications, you should be able to build all those different, all that very wide variety of commerce sites using the same tools, but that creates some very heavy constraints on the design, because you need to build a platform to enable patterns, and those patterns are business patterns. And you don't know them in advance, and they're going to be different for each case. That was the base idea coming from my own experience building commerce websites. And yeah, so for example, if you look at what we have for checkout, so that's a feature that's not yet developed, but there are some ideas there. And the main idea is that it should be based on workflows. And this is because workflow is a feature of Orchard that is exactly adapted to this, which is that it enables you to build custom business processes from building bricks. And it acknowledges the fact that those processes need to be changed and evolved and so on. So that makes it an ideal way to build something like checkout, because checkout can be very, very different from case to case. All right, so I would invite anyone wanting to contribute to the project. Anyone should start probably with this list of features and try to get acknowledged with all those things and all the things that were decided or not decided. So I'll just enumerate them fast to tell you what exists and what doesn't exist. And I'll make the demo of what already exists. So product catalog, that's pretty much done. And it has, again, it leverages features of Orchard to implement that flexibility that a commerce platform needs. So it doesn't reinvent stuff that already exists in Orchard, but it adds some new features that don't, such as product attributes, and we'll talk about that in details. But a product attribute is a concept of content that doesn't exist in Orchard, but that's necessary for commerce, and that was added to core commerce. The shopping cart is also done to a degree. When you build a shopping cart, you usually want to have a JavaScript-based experience that is very dynamic and fast. What I implemented is kind of the fallback of that, which is a form submission-based fallback that works even when JavaScript is not enabled. But it's pretty fast. It works pretty well. We'll see that in the demo. Checkout is absolutely not implemented. I started implementing stuff like addresses and orders that are necessary to build that. I started implementing some very basic activities for workflows that should enable one to create a checkout workflow eventually, but almost everything is missing. So that's what I was going to work on next if I had time to spend, which I don't. Base infrastructure for payment is not there. It's of course necessary for checkout. The other content type exists, but it's very minimal and it needs a lot of work. The workflow activities corresponding to those, and shipping and tax are not there either. And of course, you can't sell something if you don't have shipping and tax in place. But for those, I think the implementation that's in Nwazet Commerce should be a pretty good basis for a good design. They are based on base contracts that you implement, because again, shipping and tax are also things that are different everywhere in the world and potentially from business to business. So that also requires a lot of flexibility in design. All right, so let me demo this. So I I'll do it in two steps. The first step will be to show you kind of a website built with this. So this is you will recognize that. That's the agency agency website, except that I added a few things. I added a product list. So this is just a product content, sorry, a list content type that is restricted. I'll show the content type definition, but it's basically a list of, restricted to be a list of products. So in there, I have two products. First product is thing one. Second product is a shirt. So you can add a product to the cart. You can modify quantities, update your cart, and so on. So this works as expected. There is something that doesn't work as expected, which is that I have a product attribute that is associated to this shirt to enable you to specify the sizes. And for some reason, it doesn't appear here. I have to debug that. I noticed that this morning, and I don't know what's going on here, but I will fix that this week. All right, so that doesn't look like. Look at the admin side of this. And I want to emphasize that this is just a regular Orchard core website that I just set up going through the setup experience. The only difference with a vanilla website is that I added a reference to the commerce component, and that's it. That's the only. I mean, if you look at we look at the project for this application. It just has the reference, and that's all it has. That's different from a regular Orchard application. So let's look at the content types. So the first thing I showed was the product list. So this is a list content type, and it's restricted to products. And again, that shows you that when there is an Orchard concept that exists, we are not coming up with our own. So your list of products can be results of queries or list content type. You just do whatever you have to do. You can use taxonomies to categorize your products. I don't care. That doesn't matter. That's on the Orchard side. So there is nothing specific about that.
Probably we should still offer this at least a recipe to
yes.
Include the batteries.
So let me just actually show you this.
Oh, there is one.
When you go to recipes, you actually have some recipes there. When you create the website, you could have a recipe that creates you a simple commerce site. Although as I've said, I don't believe that's very useful, but it can be useful as a sample, at least so that people get accustomed to the system. That doesn't exist, but it would be super easy to create. Might be a very good first contribution, by the way. But what you have here is a number of recipes for content types. And in particular, there is one for a basic product. And this just creates, a very basic content item with the product part. And the product part doesn't even have a price. Let me go back to, content definition. Let's look at the product type, and so ignore the field for the moment. That's one that I added, but the rest of it here, the parts that you see here, those are the parts that were created by the recipe. I just ran the recipe to create that content type. All right, so it has a product type. And the product type, there is nothing to configure on it. It's just marking the content item as a product, and that makes it possible to add it to the shopping cart, basically. But it also has a price part, and the product part and the price part. The product part and the price part are two different things, because you might actually be using commerce mechanics to distribute, I don't know, PDFs, for example, that you're not even charging for. So why make the price a mandatory thing on commerce? I don't think you should. flexibility again. If you want a price, you add a price. If you don't want a price, you can remove that part. You can shopping cart and etc. Without necessarily having a price. And there is another reason for that. Your price might be different. I mean, this is the stock implementation of a price part that has a single price where you can, configure the currency, but you might implement your own price part that's based on some custom business logic that you have. I'm letting you do that. That's fine. Again, our chart is so flexible that this is pretty easy. Okay, so a product is basically a content item with a product part and a price part, or not.
Did you consider having a stereotype for products as well, or a commerce stereotype or something to denote them from standard content?
That is sort of what the product part is. The product part pretty much does nothing except that it's recognized by the shopping cart as something that you can add. Does that make sense? I'm not sure what a stereotype would add, but maybe, I don't know, maybe. If there is a benefit to implementing that as a stereotype, why not? But I see so a content item can have only one stereotype, right?
Yep.
So it didn't seem useful to me, but that's debatable.
Okay. Just a quick.
You can consider the product part as a marking interface, like an interface that does nothing. That's just here to specify that something is something. Yeah. So this content type is a product, but yeah.
The versioning and all the stuff from content items, because it's not a content item anymore.
Sorry?
And if you create a stereotype, you lose all the features from content items like versioning and draft and so on. So also, but then you can, and also it disappears from the content item list. It's not a content item anymore. And you should create a custom page to list the products. That's the idea. So yeah, it should be a content item here.
Okay, good. So the thing that I added that I mentioned earlier is the product attribute. So let me explain what a product attribute is and how that relates to content parts and content fields. So you have the content type, then you have instances of that content type that are content items, okay? And then you have actual products that customers put in their cart, okay? And those products might have variations, like you're buying a shirt, you're going to specify the size or the color or the shape or whatever, okay? So those are properties of the instance of the content item. So it's one more level, and that one is on the customer side. It's the customer's version of that content item varies, okay? So it's one more level of stuff that you can attribute to those entities. So the way I implemented that is using fields. So let me go back to the content definition. I'll add one. So if I add a field, like for example, material. Oops. So you can see that I have special field types here for those attributes. And there is a Boolean, there is a numeric one, and there is a text one. The text one is actually the most useful because it has, if I edit it, it has predefined values. So it's also, you can also do select and multi-select. So it's very flexible. It's for anything that is text or choosing in a list of text options and so on. So here for material, we have, I don't know, cotton and whatever. And you can add some hints and so on. And you can restrict to the predefined values. You can allow to select multiple values and so on. Doesn't matter. So if I edit a product now, so content items, product, let's edit that shirt. Now, see that I can't edit those because it's the customer that will choose a value here. I just see a summary of the definition of the attributes, right? So here for the new one that I added, I can see that I have predefined values and so on. And when I look at the product on the front end, I should see UI to choose which version of that product I'm ordering. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
How do you manage stock of certain product versions?
That's a great question. So inventory management is also something that is not built yet, but it's I don't think I put it in the minimum viable product, but I think that should probably be there. Yeah.
And I have
There is
another question. Yeah, sorry.
There's a ticket for it. There is a ticket for it. Issues. Inventory, do you see it? It should be there. Is there a second page? No, I don't see it for some reason. Oh, it's under this. Yeah. So yeah, there is a suggestion of implementation here for inventory. Inventory is also something that will greatly vary because a lot of businesses will actually want to externalize the inventory management. So it will probably be a service that you ping to know how many of an item you have and so on. So yeah, there should be a minimum implementation of that, but it's also something that should be very flexible. Okay, so your other question?
Yeah, my question was why or how can you not use taxonomies for the attribute fields? It looks like when you had the predefined values there, it looked to me like a case for taxonomy.
Well, taxonomies adds values to the content item. Here you have that you have the version of the product that the customer wants to put into their cart. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I agree that the taxonomy UI would be wonderful to kind of create those predefined values, for example, but it's not the right concept because it's happening at the level of the content item. You're basically going to associate a shirt size to your shirt content item, but you don't want all shirts to be small. Mm-hmm. You want the customer to be able to choose that. So
okay, makes sense.
You would be able to define the range of values, but yeah, it's the wrong concept.
Okay.
Oh, one more thing. I'm not sure whether this is what you explained already, but wouldn't it make sense to store a content item in the order as well? To pretty much snapshot the product that the customer ordered?
Yeah, that's what it's doing. When you in the shopping cart, what you have is the product SKU and the set of attributes. And actually, most of the complexity of the shopping cart is in maintaining those attribute values, because you need to carry them around all the way to the checkout process, right? And also, so if you order multiple shirts, for example, you might order one shirt with one size and one shirt with another size, right? So you can have multiple versions of the same product in your cart simultaneously, and you need to carry all that. And yeah, that's definitely one of the most complex parts of the shopping cart as it stands today.
Did you experience any issues with old orders? I don't know. I don't imagine that would be an issue, but like you change something in the data model, then you have to update all the items so a display won't break, like an exception from a driver. Did you experience any problems with that related to all the other products being saved previously?
So on core commerce, we are not there yet, right? There is no order, there is no checkout yet, right? So, but what there is the shopping cart. So, for example, you might imagine a case where product price changed while you're in the process of ordering, right? So you have to decide, does the price change apply to what I already have in my cart, and so on. And that's the kind of business logic that actually different businesses might want to implement differently. They might want to, for example, hire the customer that there was a price change and we're changing the price in your cart, for example, right? But that's something that you should be able to implement. But yeah, currently the price that is in the shopping cart is rehydrated every time we use the shopping cart, basically, so that the price always comes from your product catalog. And does that make sense? But you might have other changes, such as, for example, product attribute value that disappears for some reason. And I don't know how that would pan out with the current implementation. But yeah, that's a good question. It's probably something we should have tests for.
And don't you want to save the price as well? Because, you know, if I order something today, but tomorrow it gets more expensive, I'm still paying the price of today.
So when you order, you want to fix the price. But what happens before the order is it can vary. It depends. Remember when I said there is no such thing as simple commerce?
Yeah.
We can go pretty deep in custom logics, but yeah, you're correct. The price needs to be fixed after at least once the order exists, and that's the case with You can go to the Nwazet Commerce implementation of orders and checkout to get an idea of how I was going to build that. So that's all in place in there.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of which, obviously Orchard Core is much different, but why didn't you just start with a straight up port?
Because I wanted to revise actually a lot of the design decisions that I had made on Nwazet Commerce. So we had a discussion about that, and I kind of decided that clean slate was preferable. But yeah, could have gone either way. It's in part a selfish decision to build something from scratch.
To play around, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought that I would reuse a lot more than I did, because adapting the code was actually not that easy, and kind of forced me to not change some design decisions that I wanted to change. Yeah, to be frank, there is a lot in the way that I started building the project, which was kind of, you know, selfish decisions about what I wanted to do. I didn't have a customer, right? So with Nwazet Commerce, I was the customer, so I had a very, very strict set of constraints that I didn't have on this one. How about switching to code now?
That was a complete feature set from the UI?
Yeah, except for the product attribute front end, which is missing for some reason. But you can probably extrapolate. You're going to have a bunch of selects or whatever to enter the values of your attributes. and you're also going to see them in the shopping cart. All right, so let's look at how the project is factored. So what you've seen is the sample web app. And as I said, the sample web app doesn't look like much. If you look at program and startup, it looks pretty normal. We're just studying Orchard. The only real difference is in you open the project file in, oh, there it is. Yeah, we just have a reference to the commerce project. And this is for easy development. When you do your application, you would refer to the NuGet package, of course, instead of the project. But yeah, that's the idea. You just add commerce by adding a reference to commerce, and that's it. So that application is not very interesting. Other than that, so we have the test project. Looking at tests is always a good way to get a feel of what the code is about and how it's factored. So I invite you to do that. But other than that, you have 3 projects. The main commerce project, and we have 2 smaller projects here. And those have been separated because they could apply to something else on our chart. So we made the decision at some point to extract them as separate components with their own project. So this one is all about managing addresses and formatting addresses, because that's something that varies a lot over the world. So we need the proper abstractions so that we can represent, persist, and format addresses from anywhere in the world. And then we have the money data type, and that is pretty central and pretty important. So let's start with the amount type. So an amount is a pair of a value, which is a decimal, and a currency. So for the currency, we are largely relying on the stuff that is provided by .NET, but it can go beyond that. If we look at the currency type, it has a little more. It has stuff that we need, and that's not necessarily on the .NET APIs. Also, the fact that it hangs on culture is kind of annoying, because when you use it, you deal with culture info and stuff like that, and it's not immediately obvious that you're just dealing with money. So yeah, the currencies and amounts have a number of operator overloads, and it's a very focused system of a small number of types to deal specifically with money amounts. And yeah, so just to show you what I'm talking about when I'm talking about what culture info doesn't provide you, we have, for example, so all those currencies here come from culture info, but there is one which is, where did I put my Bitcoin? Well, there is a Bitcoin currency, for example, and that shows you how you can implement cryptocurrency in there. And cryptos are, of course, not on culture info. Does that make sense?
One thing, I think I've seen a discussion about this somewhere, but why are these 2 projects, the name of these 2 projects, not prefixed with what you call as commerce or something?
Because they are not, they have no reference to our chart whatsoever. They are just libraries that deal with currency and addresses, and they don't have any reference other than .NET. By design, they are just made to be very pure abstractions that don't rely on our chart at all.
Yeah, I guess so. Just the project here is Orchard Commerce, and if we publish all of this on NuGet, then probably is very generic name, so it'll be an issue.
Oh yeah, sure. So the name of the NuGet package would probably be something like Orchard Core Commerce Money Data Type or something like that. I don't think I've published those on NuGet yet. Yeah, and there isn't even any NuGet metadata in there. But yeah. What was I going to say about this? Yeah, just a small note about converters. So JSON converters. There was a discussion actually about that, and I misremembered things. But we have both for all the entities that we need to persist, we both have system text JSON serialization implementations and a Newtonsoft implementation that is usually labeled legacy, but I don't think it's going away as long as Orchard itself. What's the current status of serialization in Orchard core itself? We're still on Newtonsoft, right?
Yes.
Almost
yes.
things.
But now we are on 6. We can, if we work on that, migrate to system text JSON. That would be an ultimate goal to use that instead of Newtonsoft.
Okay, so sort of the same thing here. Both implementations exist for everything, but it's kind of a bummer because you have to maintain both. And that sucks, but yeah. Okay, so let's look at the commerce project itself. Always a good idea to look at abstractions first. So you can look at that list of abstractions and recognize a few things. So you have a number of things about attribute providers and money, currency, payment, and so on. And as it's an Orchard library, we have models for the price part, for example. So the price part, as you can see, is just the content part that has a price. That's very, very basic. Then you have another one here that is interesting to look at, which is a price variance part. So this is an example. I talked about that during the demo, that prices are things that are not necessarily going to be as simple as just a simple price per product. There are many reasons for that to be different. Like you can have a different price per territory, or I don't know. But yeah, this is an example of another content part that implements a notion of price that is a little different. Here you have different variants of the price that are keyed by a string, but that's another way to do it. You can have also the notion of prioritized prices. And this has to do with basically discounts, where you can have multiple prices that exist, and you can have custom logic to select which price you're going to apply to a customer. And the logic for that, I mean, we don't have enough time to go into all the little nuances of that, but that should be an illustration that everything in the platform is made to be pluggable, and so that you can plug in your own custom business logic in there. Product path, all it has is a SKU, because that's a central concept in commerce. Product has a SKU, and that's kind of how you identify it. It is basically the identity of your content item. And I think actually I have yeah, I'm not sure I remember exactly how that well, I shouldn't dive too deep on that. We don't have that much time, but yeah. Yeah, so we also have stuff that is there, and that's kind of the beginning of a checkout implementation. I have the notion of a credit card payment that exists here, that is attached to orders, and it's a very preliminary implementation. So you see some structures that I started building, but it's not orchestrated yet into a full checkout implementation. What should I show first? I think, so as I said, the most complex part is probably attributes. So how about I look at the model for one of those fields? How would that be? Okay, so product attribute field. That's a content field. So you have a base abstract class here, and you have then you have the three implementations here. And of course, everything will be in the way we drive those. So product attribute field driver. I haven't touched that code for a while, so I apologize if I'm a little slow to navigate this, but Boolean product attribute field driver. I'm surprised that it doesn't do more than that. Probably because it's actually not that much in the backend. The logic is mostly in the shopping cart itself. You know what? Let's look at that. Yeah, let's look at the shopping cart controller. So this is the only controller in the project right now. But okay. So let's look at the index. Let's look at this one in detail. It's worth looking at. So shopping carts currently can be persisted and retrieved from an iShopping cart persistence provider. The one that's implemented is based on session, but eventually you want one that also has a copy of the shopping cart on the client side in client storage, so that we can make things a little less chatty with the server. But yeah, and also so that it can persist also in the database, so that it can persist longer than the session and so on. But this is an abstraction we could implement many different ways. So then it gets the products, it adds the prices. The prices are not stored in the shopping cart. They are rehydrated every time because we want the prices to be from the catalog. And then it builds a view model for
by the way, about that rehydration, should that actually happen? Perhaps there are legal questions there as well, but if you put something into your baskets, then shouldn't the price remain, even if in the meantime it changes for a plug?
So that's what I said earlier during the demo. There are many different ways you can do that, and you're right. It sometimes relies on regulation. It can rely on the business model, and so you can have different processes. And so this price service here, that's also an abstraction that you could implement in different ways. So what it's doing is that it takes a list of items and it adds the prices. So it's very, very generic. You could do anything in there. So the base implementation that's in there. So if I go to services, yeah, the price service here. So this one is just getting them from the product catalog. So it's it's basically the simplest implementation you could have. But yeah, you could have much more complex implementations of that. Okay, so then it just communicates that view model to the view. But then you have what happens when you add or remove items, and this is a lot more complex because it has to parse the data that comes back from the client side. Actually, let's put a breakpoint and see what happens when I, for example, go to my website and let's go to the cart. Oh, it is empty. Okay. So my session expired, see? So we need an implementation that persists a little more than that. Oh! I don't know why I didn't have that earlier, but there, you can see it, finally. So that should break into this. I don't know what's happening. Oh, there it is. Yeah, so we're getting lines here. Let's hover over this, and here you can see my attributes that are coming in. So I have one attribute for the size, one attribute for the material, and you can see that the product size is what I selected. So we are going to take those attributes and we're going to persist them. And there is a lot of logic that is there to, okay, so if I'm changing a quantity, I need to find the proper version of the product, the one that has the attributes for the change quantity. So there is a lot of logic to match the product with its list of attributes and so on. So I encourage you to dig into that code. It's a good way to better understand what attributes are doing, right? What happened here? Oh, there it is. So here in the cart, now I can see the values of the attribute that I selected. And of course, all that is defined in views that you can modify. If we look at the shopping cart view, shopping cart, you can of course override all of that. The attributes are here. So here it's just listing them, but you could do it differently. Yeah, so we're about 5 minutes from the hour. Is there anything you'd like me to show in particular in those 5 minutes, or do you have any questions? We can do more of those, by the way. If you want to meet again, that's we can do that.
If nobody else, I would have a question about the MVP and plans and stuff like that. Do you have a specific feature set in mind that somebody would actually use right away? I mean, if not the whole MVP with payments and everything.
I'm not sure I understood the question.
I think what would be useful here is to build something first that a couple of people would employ on their websites already, so it would actually go to real users. But if perhaps also we would open a shop just to dog food it. And I would be curious whether you know about such use cases where you know that, okay, we have this plan for the MVP, but if we have this and that, then 2-3 people,
yeah.
3 people.
Okay. Okay. So the most common request I've had was from people who basically only needed Stripe payments on top of what's currently implemented. So if you added checkout with Stripe payments, you would already have a few people who would start using it today.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think so checkout with Stripe as the default implementation. That's basically the for me the no-brainer next step. That's this. Then I would add a very simple tax provider with a fixed tax amount, well, by territory. So where you can manually in the admin make a list of territories and tax amounts, tax percentages, and just apply that. That would enable people to start applying taxes to their sales, which is kind of necessary. And then, but only after that, shipping. Because, and I'm saying after that because it's something that you can pretty much externalize. There are a lot of sites that can actually function with fixed rate shipping, and that can just externalize all of that. But when you start having requirements in terms of shipping that go beyond having a fixed rate for shipping products, then things become hellishly complex very fast. To the point that there are businesses that exist that do to shipping what Stripe did to payments, which is simplifying and externalizing the experience completely. So yeah, it's a massively complicated thing to tackle. So probably not the first thing you want to look at. You always want, in any case, you always want to start with a very simple minimal implementation of something. So you might look at each of the MVPs and each of the MVP features, for example. You can look at each of the MVP features and have their own MVP in there, right? So you look at taxation and you have an MVP which is apply your rate of taxation per territory and not have any complex logic. But you could also say, yeah, that doesn't fulfill my business needs. I really need to have the tax code for the territory where I'm selling to be implemented in a much more complex way. And that's so you want your abstraction to be able to implement any taxation logic. And that can become very difficult very fast as well, like for shipping. So yeah, that's the basic process is that you determine the features that you need, and for each feature you determine the minimum implementation that you need. And then you can start doing more complicated stuff, but when looking at the minimum viable product, that's a good way to look at next steps.
Well, thank you. I think that would be it for now. We are right on time, unless anybody else has something urgent.
I hope this was useful and not too confusing. If there is confusion about anything, I'm very available. I'm super grateful that Lombic is taking over the project, and I'm willing to help with anything, any question that you may have. I know that there are, yeah, for example, that little thing with product attributes not appearing, I'd like to understand why that happened and fix it. But you know, if you find a bug, let me know, and it might be something simple that I might be able to fix, or I can point you in the right direction. But yeah, and also I want to be involved actually in the design. So if you have design discussions, please do include me. I'm more than happy to participate in those. I'm completely willing to. So yeah.
That's great to hear. Thank you. And this is some exciting stuff.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to what you guys are going to build on top of this, hopefully healthy basis. So yeah,
it's important that if we add taxation, then we should also add representation.
Yeah, I don't know how that would work, but yeah, you tell me.
All right. Thank you, Bertrand.
Thank you very much.
We'll convene a bit, and we'll get back to you and join in on the community or join in on GitHub to the community.
All right. Thank you very much.